Hi, everyone. My name is Tanmaya Jain, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called inFeedo. And we've been working for the last 7 years in the space of AI in HR and have been given the privilege to work with a few hundred enterprises, 300,000 employees, 60 team members, raise $3 million, and make sure that we make the voice of every employee in all of these companies feel heard and valued at scale, right? And what I'm super excited to share with you today is how we can use AI for mental well being and how we can use AI for employee retention. So, there are two problems that I've noticed most of these companies were facing, and what we learned over these years, especially after COVID, which I would love to share with you right away. So if you see my screen now, step number one for most of these companies was to understand the difference between what's happening on the left side of this bell curve and what's happening on the right side. Most of us tend to stigmatize mental well being by bucketing it as mental illness, depression, suicidal tendencies on the left. Whereas on the right side, we are also aware of apps like Headspace, Calm, etc. in the consumer space, where we speak about meditative practices, etc. But the focus for corporates and enterprises has to be in the middle, where we begin to understand mental well-being, mental wellness, even mental fitness in a proactive manner, where we're asking our employees how they're feeling, and we genuinely mean it when we ask them, right? And how can we act on whatever information we get at an individual level, right? And it gets really, really difficult at scale because most of these companies have an HR business partner to employee ratio of 500 is to 1. And that makes proactive mental wellness a huge challenge, which is why something like AI can definitely act as augmented intelligence, let alone artificial intelligence. So that's step number one, right? Step number two now, if you see my screen, is what we think happening on zero may not necessarily be what's actually happening on ground zero. And the reason why this has been happening is most of these companies have been relying on annual engagement surveys or quarterly engagement surveys, where you only find out once a year or 4 times a year how people are feeling. And post COVID, right? Especially when everybody's working from home, you can't see them as well. There is a huge gap between what's actually happening on ground zero and what you think is happening on ground zero. And again, the biggest reason here was that even though we might be proactive, it is humanly impossible to individually understand everyone's ambitions, desires, problems, and track them over a longitudinal frame. For example, how was Tanmay feeling 5 years ago? How is Tanmay feeling today? How will Tanmay feel tomorrow? And predict what can I do for Tanmay so he doesn't feel this way going forward. So this is a massive problem to solve, but we had an interesting idea which we experimented with a few years ago. And touch wood, I'm very grateful that it's worked for all of us. So what's happening now is we said, let's have an individual by the name of Amber. She's an AI engagement bot who will chat with thousands of employees. And at the end of the day, come back to your CEO, your HR, and tell them who is happy, who is disengaged, who is most likely to leave, and who does the CEO need to meet, right? Because if you have 5,000 employees, the CEO can only meet perhaps one or two a day at best, right? So that's what Amber's job is, to augment and help CHROs find out where to focus, whether it's a location, whether it's a manager, whether it's a function, and so on and so forth. So there are three steps to make Amber work. So we remove the mystery from the AI. Step number one is to select the touch points and questions that Amber will be asking and customizing them towards your organization context, like we have done with both Group M and MediaCom. What you will observe here is Amber on the employee clock, where when the employee completes 30 days, 60 days, 90 days of joining, and so on and so forth, she's speaking to Amber on the employee clock. Now, that's the time interval. There is also an event interval. It could be a manager change, a location change, a project change, or even a performance appraisal. The ideology here is that Amber is present to help you in moments that matter. And there are scientific questions that are designed to understand how each and every employee feels in those moments. And that's what step one is. This is where we have a people science team that has run the psychology to ask the right questions at the right time. That's step number one. Step number two is the conversation, the AI itself, where Amber can understand each and every text using a technology called sentiment analysis or natural language processing, where each and every text is analyzed. Amber understands the emotion, and basis that, she decides how to proceed with the conversation. Whether it's to empathize by saying, "Hey, I'm so sorry to hear that, Tanmay. Is there a reason why you're saying this?" So she has the preliminary conversation on her own instead of the HR having to do it again and again. And step three, which is one of my favorite parts, is to predict which individual after the conversation is most likely to leave, right? And how Amber does that is she'll come back to the CEO, the CHRO, and tell them that, okay, you have to meet 5 employees in this entire month because they are top performers in perhaps in USA who are most likely to leave because of the following reasons. So when you do approach that conversation, you're well prepared. The conversation is meaningful, and there is a track record of how that individual is feeling over time. All right. So one of the most fascinating points was how the employees were now responding to Amber. And what I understood was there's an HBR study which says 58% employees would trust a stranger more than their own manager. And what was fascinating to see is that 92% employees who spoke to an AI bot actually stayed because they loved talking to Amber. So we were very happy that we were able to make a difference in the lives of 300,000 people on this planet and make sure they have a friend at work who they can actually confide in. And it completely resonates with our mission statement is how can we make sure the voice of every single employee on this planet is felt, heard, and valued, especially in a time when we're all struggling and sometimes nobody even bothers to ask us how we're feeling. And that's the core essence of how we feel about Amber and how you should feel about your employees to build a great culture as we head into 2021. To summarize why I'm so excited about Amber, I would show you just one slide. Um, what we've been able to do over these years is to make sure that A, we reduce attrition for companies, like I said in the beginning, we're able to reduce the cost of backfill, increase the engagement scores, and most importantly, have the HR function switch from being a transactional support function to a consultative, strategic business partner to every CEO that's there in a group company. And at the end of the day, to recap, there are 3 points we must remember. Number one is remove the stigma from mental well being and look at it in a proactive manner. Number two is to make sure we focus on individual employee engagement and not have blanket practices or blanket company wide surveys with the exact same questions. And number three is to make sure that you have a friend at work and that friend at work augments the HR to make you more consultative as a function. So that's Amber in a short nutshell. And I'm so glad to be given the opportunity to present to you today. Hope you're all doing well and fine. Thank you.